So let's take Eastern Gama grass, for example. This is a grass that typically grows more around wet areas. It's a big old bunch grass, and it's got a seed head that has the female parts that kind of look like it's a corn, and then the male stamens above. It's a real neat grass. So, but it's found throughout, kind of like here in Texas. You can find it in College Station, and you can find it in Lakey. Well, with our drier climate, which Eastern Gama grass type do you think is going to do better? The one from College Station or the one from Lakey? It's the one from Lakey. They do a lot more better here because they're more drought tolerant and more adapted. And then saving money. So this is a little bit of a dirty secret in horticulture. Sometimes if you grow all your plants, you actually don't save money, especially with vegetable gardens. If you have all the equipment already, so for example, I raise transplants, I've got all the plug trays, I've got the potting soil, I know where to go for that kind of stuff. It's actually pretty cheap for me just to grow my own native plants. But if you're kind of starting from scratch, you have some high input costs, and that may not be, you may not save as much money as you think you are. But still, it's fun, it's a nice hobby, and you can get some really cool stuff that you just can't find like a local nursery. So where should you collect? Well, number one, please don't collect in state or city parks, especially in Enchanted Rock. Yes, please do not collect up there. Now, they have a lot of cool stuff, I'll grant you that, and it's sorely tempting, but don't collect in state and national parks and city parks as well. Also, here in Texas, we typically don't like random people trespassing on private property. That's generally very frowned upon, and sometimes they can be aggressively frowned upon. So you got to get the landowner's permission first. Then even then I would wear bright clothing, but just don't go like traipsing on a place because you just saw right over the horizon that hill country pensiment and you're going to go out there and get it, but you got to cross a couple fence lines to get it. No, get permission first. They'll probably be okay with you going and getting it. Park safely. So you can collect plants off the side of the road. I have done this many, many, many times. The fact that yellow Indian grass is off of the side of the road. Rest of the stuff, oh yeah, the soapberry too. You gotta park safely, so don't park right in the middle of the road, kind of pull off into the shoulder and make sure it's a nice gentle area, but yes, you can collect plants and seeds off the side of the road. And then with permission, I mentioned that one already. So gear, you actually don't need too much to collect seed, or at least if you just want to get it done. For example, I've been like wearing a jacket and I see, ooh, look at that plant right there. And then I'll stop my car and I'll get out and then I'll just fill up my pockets with seeds. If you're desperate, that works, but ideally you would have like a paper bag to put the seeds in. We prefer paper because the paper can allow the seeds to dry. The seeds aren't going to get too moist and then kind of rot. That's undesirable. Then you have pruning shears. So if you're going after trees or shrubs or that kind of thing, you can, well, actually here, I've got an example right here. This is Western Soapberry. Paula, I'm so sorry, I'm gonna make a mess. I promise I will sweep it up afterwards. This is Western Soapberry. People on the camera, this is Western Soapberry. There you go. So I clipped this one. I was driving along this morning, going to work. I was a little bit late for work because of it, but whatever. And I just saw it. I was like, oh, I'm talking about that plant today. And so I just clipped them. So this is a lot easier than just kind of dragging the seeds off the tree, especially if you were in a hurry because you were late to work. Gloves. Some people like to protect their hands from like scratches and stinging insects and scorpions and that kind of thing. I honestly don't care. I don't usually wear gloves, but if you are concerned about such things, you should wear gloves. And then brightly colored clothing, as I mentioned before, if you're going on private property or even on a roadside, this is usually a good idea, especially as we get into hunting season. So we're going to talk about two types of propagation. First one is going to be asexual propagation, and then we're going to talk about seeds and that kind of thing. So asexual propagation is basically cuttings or division or layering. What you're doing with asexual propagation is that you're taking a clone. Does anyone here like Star Wars? Did y'all see that Clones movie? Yeah, it's kind of like that, but it's plants. So actually, it's done differently, but we'll get to that. So you're cloning plants with asexual propagation. Now, there are some benefits to asexual propagation with cuttings and such, and there are some negatives. The positives are that you can get something that is genetically the same. So say for example, sorry, I coughed. There is this salvia that was discovered by one of my coworkers. It was a big bushy one, kind of blue, very pretty, and he very much admired it. So he went in there, he took cuttings of it, and he was able to replicate it genetically the same. That's also the weakness. So y'all all here know what oak wilt is, right? Y'all notice that we have a lot of oak wilt here in Gillespie County. Well, one of the reasons why oak wilt is so bad is because all the live oaks there's just not a lot of genetic diversity in that population. So live oaks, what they tend to do is they will send out root suckers and they will form moss, and they're all genetically the same. So if you have diseases coming in, having that same genetics is a negative. We're going to briefly talk about layering and division. I'm not going to go into that too much. Layering is pretty simple. All you do is, this is the best for like brambles and vines. You take the vine, which is kind of bending over, you take the tip, bury it in like a pot with like some potting soil and that kind of thing. And then you wait for it to root. This may take a month or two, depending on what the plant is. And then eventually you will come in there and you will clip the top. And then ta-da, you're going to have a plant rooted and ready to go. It's pretty easy, but it does take time. It takes a lot of time. Then there's division. So division, in a horticulture sense, this would be you going out there and digging up the plant and dividing it and putting half of it back. But to be honest, if you're digging up a native plant and then you put half of it back, especially if it's in the wild, it's probably not going to do too great. So you may just take the entire thing. Cuttings. So we've got three main types of cuttings. We've got softwood, which is going to be the very top of the growth. This is generally going to be with like trees and shrubs. It's going to be like the fresh growth. With like herbaceous plants, this is going to be pretty much, they don't form woody stems. It's going to be pretty much that. No wood at the base. What the problem with the softwood cuttings is that it tends to wilt. If you don't get it if you don't stick it right away, or you don't get into like a high moisture area, those cuttings are going to wilt and then they're going to die and then you're going to be sad. So softwood cuttings, kind of fussy, probably going to be more so for like forbs and small shrubs and such. I doubt you're going to do it with something that's very woody. Semi-hardwood cuttings, these are going to be woody cuttings, but they're not dormant. So they're like the middle part of the stem where they've at least got a little bit of lignin in there and they've kind of solidified a little bit so that you can take them and you stick them and they're not going to wilt right away. They may eventually wilt. Hopefully you'll do cutting propagation appropriately so they won't. Hardwood cuttings, I kind of disagree with the picture here, but it kind of had the progression and I like that. That's why I'm using it. The hardwood cuttings are going to be more dormant cuttings. They're going to be more of the pictures right here. So you're going to take these in the winter when the tree has lost all of its leaves, and you're going to potentially store them until you can do cuttings with them later, until you can stick them later. They store very well, but sometimes they just take forever to root, but it depends on the species. Rooting hormone. Did y'all know that plants have hormones too? They don't have as many as humans and such, but they do have hormones. They have about 9. It used to be like 7 or something when I was in college, but whatever. They're discovering new things every day. So plants have hormones, and one of the hormones that you use for rooting is going to be auxin. This is the growth hormone. This is also the same hormone that causes the plants to kind of bend towards the light, but it also helps them form roots. Now, auxin is not stable enough to use like the natural organic kind. You're probably going to have to use some kind of synthetic varieties, such as IAA, IBA, and NAA. These were made in a lab. They're like chemistry is pretty much the same. So when you're using the cuttings, you're going to want to use higher concentrations for woodier cuttings and harder to root plants. So some things you don't even have to use this rooting hormone for. Let's see, figs are a pretty good example. They're not a native plant, I'm sorry, but with figs, you can pretty much just stick them and they should generally root. Now, the rooting hormone may encourage the rooting, may make it faster, and with some things, you're just going to definitely have to use them. So for example, for my graduate research, I did work on wild plums. For some reason, we wanted to, well, no, we had a good reason. So we were doing some research on wild plums, and we were thinking that, okay, if we found a colony that was very good, like had very good fruit or very good disease resistance, we would want to replicate it by using cuttings and that kind of thing. Oh my gosh, they took a very high concentration of IVA to like actually root. So some things just need a lot. If you get this, you're probably going to get it from like one of the nurseries, and the stuff that you're going to get locally is not going to be very concentrated. If you want like the really high concentrated stuff, you're going to have to order it off the internet and then mix it up yourself. And if you get it, make sure that you keep it refrigerated because it is kind of expensive, and not refrigerating it will cause a loss of quality. Storage. We do not store cuttings in a hot car. That is not helpful. That actually isn't cuttings, but it was kind of, I may have done that once, but I didn't take a picture of it for obvious reasons. So don't store cuttings in the car. Well, you're going to have to move them some way, but don't store them permanently in your car. Instead, there's two good ways to store them. One, which is going to be the easiest, is going to just simply take some, if you got hardwood cuttings, just take some newspaper, wrap them up in moist newspaper, and stick them in the fridge. Yeah, they may get a little moldy, but it usually isn't that bad. With the, if you've got semi-hardwood cuttings, what I use to store them is I will take a big old black trash bag, put some water in it, put the cuttings in there, and then store that in the fridge. If you, ideally, if you want to be very fancy and that kind of thing, you would take cedar mulch, moisten it, put it in a tub with holes drilled in it, and then put your cuttings in that and then cover it with cedar mulch as well. I've done that with fig cuttings too. If you want them to root, you leave them in the greenhouse where it's nice and warm. But if you don't want them to root, you stick them in the fridge. Growing your cuttings. So first things first, when you take that cutting, you're going to have to recut it. You're probably going to have to cut it to size. Most cuttings are about 5 to 8 inches in length, maybe a little bit smaller if it's a softwood cutting. So recut that cutting so that it's going to be better able to suck the moisture out of whatever media that you put it in. And then you've got your choices. You've got to kind of maintain humidity around these cuttings somehow. So there's 3 or 4 main ways. The best way to do it is going to be a mist system. You have the mist running, the cuttings, the transpiration isn't as bad, and they can kind of root in that a lot better. However, not a lot of people have that. In fact, most people probably aren't going to have that. So what could you do at home? You could root cuttings in water. This is going to be best for like easy to root stuff like willows or elderberries or rosemary. Only the elderberries are native. Anyway, you can root them in potting soil. These are pomegranate cuttings that I took myself that I rooted in potting soil. You just got to keep the potting soil moist, which I did forget. But I still got some pomegranates out of it, yes. These are probably going to be what you're going to use. This is basically a soda bottle. You cut it in half, you stick it over a pot, and you can kind of maintain that humidity there. So now we're going to talk seed collection and propagation. This is probably going to be more so what y'all will be doing. So say you're out there and you're looking for seed from Osage orange. Do y'all know what an Osage orange tree is? It's this big, nice, lush, huge tree. And it's got, oh, that's the spoiler. I'm not going to say the spoiler. So say you're out there and you're looking for its fruit. Its fruit is these green balls that look like brains. And you're looking and looking and looking. You're not seeing it. And you're like, you came here last year and you looked for the fruit and you didn't find it then. You may be like, what is up with this? I've just wasted time going and looking for this fruit and this tree doesn't have any for 2 years. Well, the secret is that Osage orange has male trees and female trees. So there's a reason why you didn't find any fruit there. So plants are particular. They have perfect flowers, which means that they have both the male and female parts. They're on the same flower. These flowers can pollinate themselves, or they can be pollinated by something else. Then we have imperfect flowers, which are the same plant, but it happens at different times, or it can be in different locations. So let's take pecans, for example. When the pecan tree is, we have some types of pecans that will put out pollen first. They don't have any female parts out, and they're just putting out pollen. Then that pecan tree will stop putting out pollen, and then they will switch to the pistillate. They will start receiving the pollens. So that's just kind of helps increase genetic diversity, because if a plant self-pollinates, that's not very genetically diverse. Then we have plants that just have like separate male and female plants all together. Y'all know ash juniper, the cedar tree of the Texas Hill Country. Yes, it has male plants and it has female plants. But you know what? Think about that. This is a good thing, because if all those cedar trees produce pollen, like all of them, if they were all both male and female, just think about how much more pollen there would be in the air. So we're lucky there's both male and female cedar trees. Additional ones include sumac, yupon, Osage orange, soapberry, persimmons, ash juniper, bigtooth maple, Texas ash, mulberry. Most of your wildflowers, so if you're looking for bluebonnet seeds, most of those parts are on the same plant, so you don't have to look and find like male bluebonnets or female bluebonnets. You're fine there. I have YouTube videos here. Do you think I could load them real quick?
Try.
We can try. All right, we're gonna try at least one of these. So as I'm attempting to load this, I want y'all to try visualizing some of these. Hello, Zoom people. Oh, I lost my mouse. There it is. So with the wind pollinated, that's going to advance the slide. You know what? We're not going to worry about that. I'm just going to describe them in descriptive terms and you can visualize them. I should have preloaded those. I apologize. So with wind pollinated, just imagine pollen floating in the wind, like the cedar trees in early spring, spreading pollen, or the oak pollen in the wind and such. That's how those things are pollinated. Some plants don't need insect or animal pollinated whatsoever, but some do. Imagine the strawberries. Oh gosh, that's not needed. I'm sorry, I do like fruits and vegetables a lot, so sometimes my mind goes to those things. Blackberries, there's wild blackberries here. Yeah. So imagine the wild blackberries, not the cultivated blackberries, the wild blackberries, and the pollen in the air, but it's not the blackberry pollen because the blackberry pollen is moved by bees to different blackberry plants. Then imagine buzz pollination. So this is kind of like a combination of wind pollination and insect pollination. Basically what happens is that an insect, particularly a bumblebee, will vibrate the plant so fast it will shake the pollen loose. This is something that is pretty much in the Solanaceae family, the nightshade family. And then water pollination, I don't have a video of that one. Anyways, how many of y'all are going to be collecting seed from aquatic plants, like plants actually in the water? That's kind of what I thought. No one's really collecting seed from water lilies. So we're not worrying about that kind. So seed collecting tips. When you're out there collecting seed, you want to avoid collecting seed from small populations. Why? Well, one, genetic diversity, and two, you don't really want to be the reason why a certain plant went extinct in a location. That's not really cool. You want to collect from different individuals in a population. Again, genetic diversity, so we don't have the oak wilt scenario. You want to collect the seed at the correct stage. So for example, I have, Cowpen daisy right here. People on the Zoom call, it's in my hands, I promise. Oh gosh, I should have brought my pruning shears. Okay, there we go, that'll work. So Zoom call people. Here we go. See? Okay. So the one that is still blooming, let's take a vote. Would you say that we can collect seed from this one that is wilted but still blooming? Raise your hand. That's encouraging. Okay, so we have a flower head. No, Zoom people, nobody said yes. Okay. What's that? I hope there's no bees. Okay. Probably my cell phone ticking something off. I'm going to slide this right here and then forget about it later. Okay, so now we have a flower that is kind of dried out a little bit. There's still a lot of green, but it's not completely brown. Are we going to collect that? No, it's not ready yet. And then we have one that is nicely brown. That's what we're going to collect. And then you also want to avoid collecting damaged seeds. This is particularly concerned with things such as acorns. So there's this weevil that will get into acorns. It will kind of burrow in there, and it will kind of, if you have those weevils in your acorns and then you plant those acorns, well, you put them in the stratification, it will infect the other acorns and eat them. So that's generally undesirable. So don't collect damaged seeds. Cleaning seeds. Ugh, this is a lot of work. So after you've collected the seed, it's going to be kind of like a big old ball, like this Cowpen daisy is. I mean, we don't want to collect that one. We want to collect this one. So you picked a lot of these flowers. What are you going to do with that now? Well, you kind of got to have to tease the seeds out of that flower. There's a few ways to do this. One is screens. And basically, as demonstrated in the picture, you're just rubbing the seed pod back and forth to kind of hopefully loosen the seeds out. That takes a lot of effort. I've done that before. If you have fleshy seeds, say that you want to collect your own Blanco crab apples, or you want to collect your own wild plums. Well, that seed, particularly with the wild plums, that seed coat may kind of cling, and you maybe use some warm water with a little bit of vinegar in it to kind of get that off. And then say that you have bluebonnet seeds. Now, this is probably going to be if you have a lot of bluebonnet seeds. You can take a pillowcase, fill it. Y'all hear that? Fill it full of seeds, and then you just simply feed it. Zoom people, here's the pillowcase. So a little bit of a short notice, I do actually not have that many bluebonnet seeds. These are lima bean seeds that I still have to clean. But it is very effective in cleaning the seeds. So all you have to do now is just sort that out. And that's a little bit of a trial, but it's theoretically not too bad. All you need to do is take a fan, gently pour the pillowcase for the seeds, and the fan should theoretically blow the seed pods away while the heavier seeds sink. Theoretically. I haven't tried it yet. I'm a little bit afraid to. So that'll work for like legumes and that kind of thing. Storing seeds. Before you store your seeds, you're going to need to let them dry. Some seeds, in fact, have to have this, or they're not going to be any good. And then there's always a mold problem. That's usually a pretty big thing. Now, where you shouldn't store your seeds is in front of your store in full sun, which is kind of a very hot climate, and it's so much sun that the seed packets bleach. So the colors get bleached. That is not good seed storage. And honestly, you should not buy seeds like that either. Instead, you should store your seeds in paper bags and envelopes if you want to go 1 to 2 years, and then just stick them in the fridge after they have thoroughly dried. That's what I do with most of my seeds. I have a whole drawer full of seeds. Then you can do long-term storage, which is going to be 2+ years. Basically, you're going to dry the seeds down very thoroughly. You can use silica gel, like those little packets that you get when you get new shoes. Put those in there as long as you're not planning to eat those seeds later. And hopefully it should dry them down. And then you can put them in a glass or a metal jar and then stick them in the freezer. I do that with pumpkin seeds. Okay, so let's take a beginning botany lesson. Go back in time. How does seed germination work? Well, basically after you plant that little seed, it needs something to wake it up, something to get it out of dormancy. Usually this is going to be moisture. So when you water the seed, that's why things start to grow. The moisture gets in there and things start to expand. This is an example. First the little roots come out, then the baby leaves come out, and then the adult leaves. So you can see this with bluebonnets. This is why it's a little bit tricky when you're planting bluebonnet seed, where you might plant a lot of seeds and you see things start to come up, but they don't look like the bottom picture. They don't have that palmate leaf. They just kind of have like these little itty bitty, like broad circle leaves. You may think that might be weeds. It's not. Just let them grow and they will get their more mature leaves eventually. Now, some seeds have dormancy requirements that have to be fulfilled so that those seeds can germinate. It's not as simple as you just take a seed, plant it in the ground, and water it, though there are some native seeds that are that simple. So mountain laurel seeds are an example. With that one, you have to scarify the seed coat. Basically, you have to damage it so that the water can get in and the seed can start to swell and start those processes. Now, there's a reason why this stuff is good and why we want our seeds to be dry, because of, I'm going to mispronounce this, vivipary. So vivipary is basically when a seed starts to germinate inside of the fruit. This can also happen. This is a spaghetti squash picture, but there are native examples. Take pecans, for example. Pecans can actually sprout foliage and roots on nuts that are still in the tree if the conditions are moist enough, which fortunately we don't get that wet around here. And they kind of bred that out. Some varieties are prone to that, so they kind of remove that. So generally, if you want like a broad kind of characterization, if you have seeds of like a tree or a shrub, it's probably going to need cold stratification. There's some exceptions, but it's usually that way. Wildflower seeds, generally you're just going to need to dry them, with some exceptions. Legumes, such as bluebonnets, they're going to need scarification, basically damage so that the seeds are going to be able to receive water and then grow. We're going to go over stratification first. Stratification is basically a period of cold or warmth in a moist condition, and that will satisfy the germination requirements. So cold stratification is going to be what y'all are going to be doing the most. If y'all are doing maple seeds, it's going to be on maples. It's going to be on acorns, most acorns. It's going to be on many of the tree seeds that you're going to try and grow. It's super easy. All you do is you take a plastic bag, you fill it up with some moist potting soil, and then you stick your seeds in that. Make sure that there's contact between the moist potting soil and the seeds. You label it. That's the hard part right there. Make sure you label it, and then you stick it in the fridge. Also, make sure that you let your significant other know what you have done so they do not throw it out. Warm stratification is like cold stratification, but it usually happens after the cold. It's a period where the seeds kind of, the embryos aren't fully developed, so they need just a little bit more development time, so they need a little bit more moist warmth before they can start to grow and such. Basically with that one, you're going to let it sit on the counter or put it on a heat mat. It's very rare. I think we only have a prunus species that requires it. Scarification. Oh, I forgot to bring that in. Oh well. So there is this writer called Jill Noakes. She wrote this excellent guide on how to grow many of the native plants in our region. And there are 2 copies of this book in the local library. You can check them out within the week. So what she's a big fan of is sulfuric acid treatments for scarification. I don't know about y'all, but one, I feel a little bit uneasy messing with acids and such. And also, it's not like it's something that you can just go down to Walmart or H-E-B and pick up there. So who knows, maybe it's at the hardware store. But sulfuric acid is one of the ways that you can use scarification. Just make sure that if you are doing that, you rinse the seeds afterwards. Other ways, my favorite way is sandpaper. Basically, what you do is you take sandpaper, you take the seeds, and you rub the seeds together. Rub the seeds in the sandpaper, and that will erode enough of the seed coat so that water can come in and have the seeds germinate. This one may take a little bit more time, and it may not be a good idea if you have a lot of seeds. Maybe that's where the sulfuric acid is a better idea, but it is pretty good. And I also feel that it's like less easy to damage the seeds. Nicking, basically you take fingernail clippers and you nick a part of the seed off, preferably the seed coat. And what this does is that it allows the water in. So if we're starting our seeds, number one, you don't have to go out there and buy pots. You can use whatever pots that you have currently, is provided that if it's something that has like a really deep taproot, it does allow for that. If you're going to reuse pots though, you want to sterilize them. Take like a 10% bleach solution, kind of dip the pots in there, then like wait for the pots to sterilize and then rinse it off. Don't use the cheapest potting soil that you can get. So you're going to, if you buy $3 potting soil, you're going to get a $3 plant. You buy $15 potting soil, you're going to get a $15 plant. So some of the cheaper mixes, they have a lot of bark, they have a lot of big things in there that is not very good for starting seed. You don't necessarily have to get a mix that says for seed starting only. You just want something that has a lot more potting soil in it. Germination requirements fulfilled. So if you've gone in there and you've got everything ready to go, the seed is right at hand, but then you forgot to stratify the seed, do a cold treatment, it's not going to grow. You could stick it in the fridge if you figure out sometime later, but more than likely the seed may just rot. And then most seeds are going to need soil coverage. For some of our gardening seeds, they actually don't need to be covered with soil, but most of the things that you're going to grow will need to be covered with soil. So let's get a few specific examples. We're going to do bluebonnets first. I have a feeling here that, okay, Raise your hand if you've ever collected seed from bluebonnets with the intent to grow it later. Zoom people, most of the people are raising their hands. Actually, I call about 2/3. So it's kind of hard not to help doing that. Now, you don't want to collect the pods too green because then they're not going to grow. I mean, I know it's tempting. You're out there. You know that you're out there now and you see those green pods. You're like, well, it'll ripen later. No, it kind of really won't, or you'll have decreased germination. You ideally want to get the pods when they have like a yellowish color or when they're kind of more brownish. With bluebonnets, we want to scarify the seeds to increase germination. Now, if you have bought bluebonnet seeds and planted them out, sometimes they come pre-scarified, sometimes they don't. So if you bought a lot of bluebonnet seeds and planted them and only like a few popped up, don't freak out. That may be that the seeds just were not scarified. Acorns. Acorns are another one that people commonly like to grow themselves. And honestly, when the trees are very productive, it's very easy. So with most acorns, you're going to want to pick them right off the tree when they have a little bit of color change, when they're not green. On the top, that is a Cowpen oak. What the acorns you can do around here is that they can get this weevil that's in the picture in the bottom with a red X on it. So when you leave them on the ground like that, if you're picking them off the ground, there's a higher chance that they are going to have that weevil larvae in there. Basically, after you've picked up all your acorns, you're going to put them in moist peat moss or moist potting soil, stick them in the fridge, make sure that you label them, and eventually they should root in the bag, and then you'll plant them. Generally, in my experience, after I picked up the acorns and put them in the fridge, this rooting has occurred in January. Yay, freezes. So you may want to keep them in a sheltered location if you plant them and they send up shoots. Oh, one thing about acorns is that they do not store well. So this is something that you generally have to plant. You have to put in the peat moss or the potting soil and then grow, because trying to keep them for like season after season, that does not work out very well. Native grasses. This is probably the thing that I collect the most seed from. I really like different native grasses, like more rare ones like big blue stem or yellow Indian grass. So this is yellow Indian grass. There was a very fabulous specimen that someone brought in. That was a nice yellow Indian grass. I don't know who did, but it was very nice, very big. So when you're collecting seed from a grass such as this one, all you do is you just gently run your hand over it, and then you get what you get. The seed that comes off in your hand, that's the seed that's ready to go. The seed that is still in the plant, I do see a few sticking out here, but that seed is not ready to go. So just leave that there. You don't want to go in there and just grab and rip it off. I mean, yeah, that seed is probably, no, that seed is okay, but you don't want to use too much force. Generally, the seed heads are going to still be green. I have pre-dried these. I cheated. I've got another easier example. This is Cytox grama. This is state grass of Texas. Basically, with this one, you do the same. You gently pull, and what seeds come? Seeds come. So this one, again, is pretty dry. I left it in my car during the day. I cheated. So what do you do once you have those grass seeds? Well, if you're going to broadcast plant them, don't pre-stratify them. Just spread them out there in the fall. Hopefully we'll get rain, cover them up with soil, and then you should hopefully be good to go, or as good to go as they're going to be. If you're going to grow your own transplants in plugs, you do need to stratify them, maybe about 30 to 60 to 90 days. It depends on what it is. I do have a website at the very end of this presentation, which has specific propagation protocols for different grass species if you're curious. Most grass species, if you soak the seed ahead of time, you can get better germination. And you may want to try that because some of these grasses are difficult to grow. For example, Eastern Gama grass, that one has very difficult germination. Actually, for both. Well, if you're going to plant in the spring, I would pre-soak the seeds because that would like speed up the germination. You technically don't want the seeds to germinate in the fall because then when the winter freezes come, they may freeze. You want in the fall to get that stratification. So I would probably say before the stratification then. Cowpen daisy. Who here knows what Cowpen daisy is? Cowpen daisy, I kind of have like a love-hate relationship with this plant. It is kind of It's one of the best pollinator plants that I have seen. I've seen bumblebees, bees, different types of butterflies flock to this plant. But on the other hand, it tends to take over spots. Like if you have a area of disturbed soil, it may have one cowpen daisy one year, and the next year it's going to be all cowpen daisies. But at least it's not that thistle. So positives. So when you're collecting the seed, it is super easy to collect, and it is going to be super easy to germinate. All you have to do is just grab those heads, kind of rub the seeds out, put them in a paper bag, and they're good to go. Maybe store them in the fridge if you want, if you feel that you need to. Planting them, the soil has to be warm for this one to grow, so just generally broadcast, or you could plant them in individual pots. Maples. I brought maple seed. Oh, there are master gardeners here. I think this tree is okay. I didn't collect it from the life garden exactly, but I collected it from near the life garden. I don't think it's part of the life garden. So this is big tooth maple seeds. I'll pass this around so you can kind of get a look. There are some leaves in there as well as a bug that I did not intend to collect. With these maple seeds, they are notoriously difficult to grow. You have got to, one, pre-soak them. Then you've got to stratify them. And the stratification is a long, long process. So this is definitely something that you want to label that bag, because even, well, I forget most of the stuff I stratify, I confess. But even probably someone with very good memory is going to forget that they put that in there, because it takes like 100 to 150 days if they germinate. You're only going to get like 20% success at best. So this is a plant that needs patience. That's maybe why their trees are so expensive. Agarita. Who here has ever collected Agarita berries for jams and jellies and that kind of thing? Who here has made Agarita jams and jellies and that kind of thing? Okay, so the seeds that you get from when you make that jam and jelly, you've actually kind of cooked them too long and you can't technically use them. They may come up, but the germination is going to be decreased. Ideally, if you were going after seed collection from Agarita, you would use a blender and kind of blend the pulp off. They need a short stratification period. Soil germination needs to be low. One of these, this is something that you need to transplant relatively quick because it forms a long fibrous root system that needs to get in the ground fairly quick. Agarita, you may be wondering, why would someone want to grow Agarita? Oh, a lot of people wonder that. Well, here, let me make a case for Agarita. I get calls in my office, people asking, hey, I want a hedge, like my new neighbor moved in and I don't really like the looks of their pool or what they're doing at the pool or that kind of thing. So they want a hedge, and honestly, Agarita doesn't make a bad hedge. It's native, it's drought tolerant, it has flowers, it has edible fruit. It'll grow in caliche. The only problem is it's kind of slow growing. So it may not block the view of that neighbor's pool completely. Gumbamelia. Who here knows what a gumbamelia or a chittenwood tree is? Okay, this is a tree that is not commonly found in the nursery industry, maybe because the branches kind of end in spines. But despite that, it usually has okay fall color, and it is actually quite a pretty looking tree and can get some acceptable height, which is kind of rare around here. The one problem I have with it is that porcupines love it. They will come out of the woodworks to come and gnaw on the bark of this poor tree. But don't hold that against it. Try and grow some. The seeds need both scarification and stratification, but one plus is that you don't necessarily have to clean the seed ahead of time. Yay! Which is kind of good because once that pulp dries on there, it is really hard to get off. You had to soak it. They're slow growing. Germination isn't going to be too great, but it is a tree that I would think would be worthy trying to propagate. Pecans, hickories, and walnuts. So in addition to pecans, we have two trees that you typically don't see in the nursery trade around here either. That would be black hickory and little walnut. Now, yes, that is a little walnut. There are much bigger walnuts. They are much bigger. I honestly thought that was just like the Arizona walnut for the longest time, but no. The walnuts are kind of like $50 size, but a regular walnut is more going towards a softball, not a softball, a baseball size. So it's still a pretty good tree. It has decent fall color. I think it kind of defoliates a little bit too early some years, but whatever. Black hickory can have a little bit of fall color, but it's something unique that we just don't see a lot around. If you are looking for a black hickory tree, they're probably going to be more towards Enchanted Rock, Willow City area. Little walnut is going to be more along our creeks or our dry creek beds. Pecan, you can find it in a lot of people's yards, but the native populations are going to be more so along the creeks and such. So when we're going to sow these, if you just want to be plant and done, just take the nuts and do as the squirrels do. Choose a spot, hopefully it's a good spot, and just bury them. Hopefully we'll get moisture, hopefully we'll get cold, and the nuts should grow. End of story. Well, then you have to protect them from the deer. I guess that's a different story. If you're going to grow them in containers, you need a nice deep 8-inch container. And even with that, those trees are going to root through the bottom and spread everywhere. Basically though, what I've done with the walnuts is I have cold stratified them for about 30 to 60 days and then planted them, and they've done pretty well. I also tried that with the hickory and it did germinate, but it did not, it had a different problem after that. Red buds, this is a common tree around here, has pretty pink flowers and that kind of thing. This is going to be something that you're going to scarify. Then it will also need stratification. Do that, stick it in the potting soil, stick it in the fridge, you're going to be good to go. One thing I would do is I would use a deeper pot than those 6-packs right there, and make sure that you collect a lot of seed. Red bud typically has a lot of infertile seed, and it does have a weevil that can get in there. So collect a lot if you're going to grow it. Clematis, you may have noticed the old man's beard on the fence lines driving around here. It's the puffy white flower. It looks very nice. Well, it's not technically a flower. Those are its seeds that you're seeing right now. They're not ready yet. They need to dry down a little bit more. They're still a little bit green. This is something that you can do layered cuttings, or you can do layers or cuttings with, as well as do the seed. Now, Clematis texensis, scarlet leatherwort, is a native to the hill country. Good luck finding one. But if you do find one, you can collect seeds from it and grow it as you would old man's beard. Mountain laurel, many people here probably tried to grow mountain laurel seeds. If they never grew, the trick was that you had to scarify them. You had to damage them in some way to get them to grow. They don't have any stratification treatments. They don't need any kind of cold treatments after that. Just damage the seed, and then hopefully it should be good to go. Turks Cap. So the bottom pictures, this picture, oh, I've got a pointer. This picture and that picture, those are from our landscape. So I expect that we will soon have a horde of Turks Cap occupying our landscape within the next couple of years. Yay, yay. This plant has red flowers. The fruits are edible and just really doesn't need any pre-treatment. All you have to do is pick those ripe fruit and then you're good to go. Well, you got to let them dry down, and then you kind of got to like tease them apart, and then you're good to go. This is something that you can easily grow from softwood cuttings as well. Flameleat Sumac, if you notice this time of year, you will see like these shrubs on the side of the road or small trees that are just blazing red. You can grow those too. They do tend to form colonies, just FYI, that may be undesirable. But this one is something that's going to need stratification and scarification. Well, scarification first, then stratification. This one has male and female plants, so make sure that if you aren't finding berries, it could be that it's just a male. You can do cuttings with this, but I would probably recommend the seed over the cuttings. Salvias. Honestly, I'm not 100% certain why someone would feel the need to collect seed from the mealy blue sage, but if you so desire, you can collect the seeds from the dry capsules, or you can take cuttings. I like autumn sage a lot, but they typically don't have seed capsules, or at least when I'm looking at them. So I would probably do cuttings from these, and you would use that propagator with like the half the soda bottle and the flower pot with this, a little bit of rooting hormone. The final plant is orange Zexmenia. This one is kind of like a shrubby 4B type of plant. Pretty good with pollinators, very good drought tolerance. Seed collection is pretty easy. Just collect the dried out heads, and this would be probably something that you need to rub against the screen. Finally, resources. So the Riverside Nature Center has a Gleaner's Handbook. It doesn't have a lot of specific information for specific native plants, but it does have a lot of good collecting tips. The second link right there, this is the, I'm going to get this wrong, National Plant Network, Native Plant Network, I believe. They have a propagation database. So you can go in there and say that you're looking to germinate blue grama seeds. You can go in there and find out how multiple people germinated blue grama seeds and that kind of thing. It's pretty cool. If I was to save any links from this page, that would be the link. Jill Noakes wrote a pretty good book that you can find in our local library. It's How to Grow Native Plants in Texas and the Southwest. Then finally, I have the link for a guide from California. It was very extensive, at least 100 and something pages. So it may not have specific species information. Well, it does, but it's for California, but it should have good general seed collecting information in there as well as storage. So with that, are there any questions? Yes.
Really blue sage plants that were babies that came off the other seed. We either pick them in the really small or wait till they're a little more established to transplant the whole thing. What's best?
So he asked people in the Zoom meeting, he said that he has a lot of mealy blue sage plants and they're sending off a lot of seedlings.
Yes.
And he's wondering when to transplant them. I would do it as soon as possible. Well, once they have like a couple sets of first true leaves. So don't wait until they get too big and the root system gets very spread out. Get them before the root system spreads out when they're kind of small. They'll transplant a lot easier. Other questions? Yes, right there.
Not a question, but red buds. I don't know how many seeds I've taken out of plant one.
Yep.
But,
Yep.
And another point, the Laurel, mountain laurel. If you collect the seeds from that pod turn gray, the seed coat hasn't started forming.
Ooh.
You can take those seeds and put them in the ground and 5 or 6 days of germinate.
Okay, I'm going to repeat what she said. One, he commented that when he's collecting from red buds, it's been very hard to find seeds because there's been a lot of weevil damage. And then I'm paraphrasing. And then 2, with the mountain laurel, if you collect the seeds when the pods are gray, or the seeds don't require the scarification treatment. When they just start turning.
Yeah, and the seeds inside, they kind of a yellow.
And the seeds are a yellowish color. The red seed coat has not formed. Just plant them.
But I have a manual jar.
Oh, cool. Nice. 98%? Wow, he had a mayonnaise jar full of the seeds without the seed coat and he had 98% germination. That is excellent. Was there another question or comment in the back?
About transplanting again, volunteer red buds, since we topic, what's the recommendation, size, timing?
She had a question about when to transplant volunteer red buds. Get them as soon as you can. Get those things in a little seedling stage. And when you transplant them, get as much dirt around the plant as you can, because there's going to be fibrous roots in there that aren't necessarily apparent. And that way the plant has a better chance of surviving. Any other questions? Yes.
We had a presentation a few months back about making soil balls and put seeds and so forth in it. Drop the balls out on the ground and spread it in. Have you used that technique for starting like native grasses, or is it better broadcast?
He had a question about using soil balls to for native grasses. I have not. I like my plants spaced out a little bit more.
Would it be good to mix the soil with the native seeds and spread that out on the spot?
Oh, he asked if it's okay to mix soil with the seed and then spread it out in the bare spots. We actually do that with some of the grass seeds when we're seeding for turf. That is a pretty good idea. Just make sure that the seed is covered. Yes, I would probably more so do that than make seed balls. Additional questions? Do we still have anyone on the Zoom still? Yes, we do. Okay, good.
Do you have a soft sheet blower?
Do I have a what?
Soft sheet blower. It's used for separating all the shaft